Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you've had a great week and we're looking forward to worshiping with you. Let us know how you're doing in the comments, and maybe you can share with us what God has been teaching you as well. Also, if you have some prayer requests, you can share those in the comments to let other people pray for you, or you can submit them through the app or the website. See you guys in the comments and enjoy the service.
Well, welcome. I'm so glad that everyone's here today and joining us. As you may know, I've been out of town for a few weeks, and I was in Uganda on a trip there with a ministry called Redeemer House, and seeing the ministry that they do. It's very much like the ministry that we're doing in Honduras, so it was kind of great to learn from that and be able to also speak into it. Some as well. Any of you that are interested in hearing about it, I'd love to talk with you more about that trip. But today we are starting a new series called The Game of Life. And we are going to start today by talking about learning to play by the rules. Most of us at least heard of the game of life if we haven't played it. And my guess is that most of us have played it. Kind of a dumb game, if we're really honest, right? You just move your little car around the board, and whatever the piece that you land on says, you have to do those things, and you hope to get ahead, right? It's about going to school and getting a job and getting married, buying a house, having kids, and making and amassing more money, going on vacations, paying bills, buying cars, and hoping to get to the end with more money than the next person. Kind of a stupid game, but sadly, that's how a lot of people actually live life, right? A lot of people kind of have this idea that life is about who can amass the most, who can have the most toys, who can have the biggest house, who can go on the biggest vacations, who can kind of get the biggest pile of stuff, right? It's like we're looking around and comparing our pile of stuff to everyone else's pile of stuff and hoping my pile of stuff is bigger than their pile of stuff. Here's the problem with that. When we live that life like that, it's just like the game, right? When you win a game, whether it be the game Life or Monopoly or whatever kind of board game you may have played at one point in your life, it can feel great to win, right? And it can feel great to be doing better than someone else. And if you're competitive, you can kind of really get into knowing that you're doing well in the game. But when it's all over and you've won the game, how long does that last? And in the end, what happens? It all just goes right back in the box, right? It all just goes in the box. A lot of times when wealthy people pass away, a question that will be asked sometimes is, well, I wonder how much they left behind, right? Well, here's the deal. It doesn't matter how much they made, no matter how wealthy they are, the answer to that question is always the same. All of it, right? We all leave all of it behind. And I don't know about you, but that makes me, and I think a lot of people, ask the question, is this it? Is this really all there is? We kind of get that idea that there has to be more than just this idea of going around in circles, this kind of treadmill kind of thinking that I just keep acquiring and losing and acquiring and losing and acquiring and hoping the acquiring is more than the losing, and at the end, that's all there is. And most of us have come to an understanding that there has to be more to life than that. And the good news is that there is. Jesus tells us that there is much more to life than that. But the only way to really discover what it is, what that more is to be willing to step back from the game for a minute and accept the fact that maybe we're not playing by the right rules. That maybe we've been playing by the wrong rules. I don't know if you've ever done that. Started a game and you're just kind of playing by the wrong rules, and you kind of find out, well, it doesn't really matter if I'm winning because I'm not actually playing the game the way it's meant to be played. And a lot of people are doing that in life. We're just kind of playing a game, and we think we're winning, but we're not even really playing the game the way it was meant to be played. So it takes a matter of taking time to step back and realizing that, and then being willing to start anew. And quite frankly, some people are just unwilling. Some people are just unwilling, one, to even take the time to step back, but two, even once we step back, sometimes it feels like a lot of people have this idea that, like, well, I know it's not really the right way, but I'm gonna keep just kind of doing it my way rather than letting Jesus take the lead. And it can be tough. It can be tough to start over. And some of us, we get so far down the road that it's really hard, right? And then there's those people that say, well, one of these days I'm going to start over, but I'm going to keep doing it my way for now. But the further we go down that road of doing it our way, the harder it is to start over. And then there's those that we realize we're doing it wrong. We realize we've been playing wrong. And then, so we say, okay, God, I get that I'm not doing it the right way. I get that I'm missing something. So I'm just going to add you to it. I'm going to keep playing it my way, but I'm going to add you to it. But you see, if we really want to win in the game of life, none of those things work. We have to start over and play by the right rules. And the first thing we have to do to be able to do that is we have to realize we can't control the game. We can't control the game. We don't have control. And that's a hard thing for many of us to accept. Cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker calls it the vital lie. The vital lie that we believe that we are in control of our life and that we spend most of our life seeking to have control. Max Dupree, he's a leadership writer and Fortune 500 CEO. He says this, he says, how often we need to learn that we can control only what counts for very little in life. Right? Here's a Fortune 500 CEO, and he says, hey, look, we have very little control. Though what we can control is that which counts for very little. And see, God's people have been kind of falling for this forever, this idea that we can control. Right? I mean, it's so hard in our culture, right? I don't know how anyone goes through life in our culture without being infected with this belief at some level. This and buying into this idea that, hey, my pile's bigger than their pile, so I'm winning, right? I mean, even if you follow Jesus, even if you've given your life over to him, it's really hard to stay out of that kind of thinking at some level. This idea that somehow my value, my worth comes by what I have acquired. But it's not a new sin. This is not something that is new to us, that God never thought of before, that God hasn't had to deal with before. In fact, we've been dealing with it since the early part of the Old Testament. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 10 through 18, Moses is getting ready to lead the Israelites into the promised land. They've spent 40 years wandering the desert. And during this time, they've relied on God for every little detail of their life. Literally, the food they ate that day, they're relying on God for. And now they're getting ready to enter into the promised land. And as they're getting ready to enter, God knows, hey, this is a beautiful place I have for you. This is a place where you're going to thrive. You're going to prosper. You're going to grow. Your wealth is going to grow. And you're no longer going to have to acknowledge me every day if you don't want to. You're going to be able to kind of forget. And listen to what he says. He says, and you shall eat and be full, and you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Now, just stop there for a second. See, he's saying, hey, look, you're going to eat, you're going to be full, you're going to be excited about the beautiful land around you. And at first, what are you going to do? You're going to thank God. Right? You're going to thank God that he's given you so much. But listen, he goes, but take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground, where there was no water, who brought you water out of a flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna that your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and test you to do good in the end. Let's stop there for a second. See, he's saying, look, at first you're going to give thanks to me. But watch it. Be careful. Watch your heart. Because as you're fed, and as you no longer have to rely on me every day for the food and the shelter, it's going to be easy to forget me. It's going to be easy to be distracted from me, right? And we get into that, right? I see that all the time. I see people, they've lost their job, or their marriage is falling apart, or their kids are struggling through things. And what do? They turn to God, right? They're at church every Sunday. They're involved in a small group. They're seeking God. They're asking people to pray for them, turning in prayer requests all the time. And people come around them. God provides for them through helping out with finding a job or providing financially, all these kinds of things. And at first, when God answers the prayer, fixes, then their marriage is repaired, or they get the job, at first, praise God. But then, as the blessings keep flowing in, distractions come. And all of a sudden, it's easier to be distracted by all the things to be done around the house that we now have, and the toys that we've now acquired, and the sports that our kids are now able to be in. And all of a sudden it's like, well, I still love God. I still acknowledge God in my life, but all this stuff kind of keeps me too busy. God understands. But then here's even the worst part. Watch this, verse 17. Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to you, your fathers, as it is this day. See what he's saying there? Beware lest it gets to a point that now you're saying in your heart, I don't even need God. It's my power. See, and we start off with distraction. But then eventually the enemy turns that to a point where our pride grows to a point where we just kind of decide we don't even need him. We can do it on our own. And we have to be careful. But Proverbs 19:21 warns us, many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. You know, I just returned, as I said, from Uganda, and anytime I return from a developing country, I'm always reminded of how easy it is for us to get to a place where we rely on our stuff. You know, I always say that I don't go to developing countries, at least when I go. I have a heart to help, you know, and there's many ways we can help. But when I go, I'm not really going necessarily to see how much help I can give, because quite frankly, it's not that much. Much of what I get when I go is a reminder to me. It grounds me. It reminds me that, man, we are so distracted in our culture. We're so caught up. Because here you go, and you know, in Uganda, the homes we visited, most of them were no bigger than the size of where twice the size of where our drums are in the church. And this small little home, and 5-6 people sleeping in it and trying to cook in there, and that's all they have, and oftentimes built out of aluminum and cardboard. And yet you see joy, you see contentment, you see peace, you see a people that understand what it means to trust in the Lord daily, and the contentment that can bring. And it reminds me that we are so distracted. We are so caught up in what we can obtain. You know, we get this idea that the real life is nothing more than a lifelong version of the game. That our life is meant to be about getting a degree, getting a car, getting a job, getting a house, getting married, and then just continuing to move forward, hoping that the ups outweigh the downs enough that we can achieve the best life possible. And so much of that is due to our illusion of control. That idea that we can control the outcome. And you know, another problem with that is when we feel like we can control, what happens is anyone who is opposed to our way of thinking, anyone who is doing things differently than what we would like them to do, we see them as competition. We see them as the enemy, because now they might keep me from having the biggest pile, right? They might keep me from obtaining my goal, right? It's a competition. But see, Jesus never intended us to go through this life as a competition. He intends us to see this world as a community of people that are all on a journey together. We have to learn that we're not in control. But then secondly, not only are we not in control, we have to give control. We have to give control to the game master, right? He's the game master. He created the game. He's the master of it, right? And Jesus taught us that if we want to find true life, if we want to really win in life, if we want to achieve the life that God has for us, that we have to give up control and we have to surrender it to Him. He says in Matthew 16, verse 25 to 26, he says, he told the disciples, if anyone, whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? Hear that? He's saying, we work so hard to hold on to our life, to continue to build our life. But if you really want to build your life, you have to hold it out and hold it open. We work hard to control something that's leading to nowhere. But you see, when you let go of trying to make your life a certain way, then we can find the true life that Jesus offers for us, the life He speaks so often about. See, unlike the board game, and most board games for that matter, if we want to win in life, we have to give up our selfish desires, and we have to learn to live for eternal purposes. You know, verse 26, it really kind of makes you think about how ridiculous this fight is. Look at what he says. He says, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world but forfeits his soul? What shall a man give in return for his soul? Right? See, I kind of picture, I keep using this illustration of piles, right? If you took all your stuff and you made it into this big pile, and you looked around and you said, my pile is so much bigger than everyone else's, right? And here's a man standing before God and says, God, look at my pile. And God says, but you lost your soul in the process. That stuff, no matter how big that pile is, can never buy our soul. But it's a daily battle. See, my guess is there some people watching this message, there might be a few who have never taken the time to really step back and say, okay, God, I have been in control and I want to give you control. There might be a few. But for the most part, chances are most of us are people who have either kind of said, hey, I want to add God into the game while I'm playing. Or we even did step back and we've turned it over to God, but man, that temptation is constantly hitting us, right? And the fight is constantly there. And it's just, we have to be reminded that it's a daily battle that we fight. A daily battle. And so I would ask you to ask yourself this question tonight. Is it working for me? Trying to play the game by my own rules? Or do I need to play the game the way it was designed by the master? Do you need to change the rules you're playing by? And play the way it was designed to be played? See, we need to quit asking ourselves, are we winning? And we need to start asking, are we winning the right life? Are we walking down the right path? Are we playing the game by the right set of rules? My brother and I had an interesting conversation last week while we were traveling in Uganda, and he was telling me about a friend of his who he's tried to witness to. And his friend has said that he believes that both his father and his brother are in hell. And so therefore, he would be betraying them if he didn't also go to hell. That's the argument he gave as to why he can't follow Jesus. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds just nuts to me. That sounds completely nuts. But I also have to say, I told my brother this. I said, you know what, though? At least at some level, as irrational as that thinking is, I at least give him a little credit that he actually thought of it, that he actually has taken the time to go, well, this is the way I see it. Because so many just are not taking the time to stop and think about it. But you see, God has designed a plan, a way for us to live, a way for us to find fulfillment. We have to ask ourselves, are we going to live by that design? Many of you know that we're in the process of a building. In fact, I encourage you to come to the campus and see what's happening, the building that's happening right now. It's exciting to see it. But you know, when we decided to make a building, we had plans developed, right? And all sorts of plans, right? You roll these plans out and there's pages of the different levels and things that need to happen for these plans. But what if Mike and the builders just came to the board at some point and they said, hey, you know what? We know we got these plans and they look great. But if you're okay with it, we just want to wing it and see if it works. We're not going to follow the plans. Well, we would hire new builders and fire Mike, right? I mean, that's if that's the way we did, we'd say, no, you can't do that. We already worked to get the plan. So follow the plan, right? Because if you just go out and wing it, sure, you might build something, right? You might get something done, but it's not going to be what it was intended to be, and it's not going to be as structurally sound, it's not going to be as strong, it's not going to be as useful. But a lot of us are trying to live life like that. There's a plan, it's been laid out. But are we going to follow that plan, or are we going to try and do it our way? There's a story told, and I'll close with this. There's a story told of a man who went straight to work after graduating from a prestigious college and at the top of his class with a business degree. And he was successful from the very beginning and rose to pretty high up in his company, making good money. Wasn't taking very good care of himself because he was so busy working, putting in long, long hours. And he got married and had kids, and he loved his family, but he noticed that there was distance growing between them. But he kept telling himself there'd be time to fix that as things started to calm down. And he noticed his health getting worse, but he said, there'll be time to fix it when things calm down. I just have to get to this next level. Well, eventually he got handed an acquisition that his company was going to make, and they said, you're in charge of this acquisition, and if you're successful with this acquisition, you'll be a partner. And so he accepts it, and he's excited. This is going to mean massive bonuses, a massive pay raise. He's going to be living at the top of the corporate ladder if he makes this deal happen. And so he comes home and he's excited and he tells his wife all about it. And she doesn't really quite share his excitement because in her mind, even though he says, well, this means we'll be able to relax. This means we'll be able to take the vacation. This means I'll be able to start going back to church with you guys. This means I'll be able to start being more involved in the kids' lives because now we'll be kind of set. I just needed to get us to this place that's set. She doesn't quite believe it. But he still goes to bed that night celebrating. But that very night, he has a heart attack and he dies. Well, you know what Jesus says about that man? He says in Luke 12, verse 20, he says, but God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things that you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God. You see, in Luke 12, 16 through 21, Jesus tells a parable that isn't as modern as today, as one I just shared, but basically the same story. A man whose land produced plentifully, and he starts to say, man, I'm living at the top of my game. And rather than seeing that God provides and seeing that the blessings are from God, not for his pile to be bigger, but for him to be able to live for eternal purposes and to share that wealth with others, to give to the things of God, and maybe also to relax a little bit more so he can serve with his own time more and be there for others more. Instead, he just decides to build bigger storehouses and keep storing up and go back at it. But God says, what is he? A fool. I don't know about you, but I don't want ever for God to consider me a fool. I want God to consider me faithful. Are you ready to start over? Are you ready to play the game the way the Maker intended? It's tough. It can mean tearing down sometimes and having to start over. It can mean taking a bunch of steps back and saying, I got to change paths. It can mean tearing the whole thing apart and realizing you weren't even on the same board. But Jesus offers all of us the opportunity, and he gives us all the ability to play by the rules. But we have to choose. What will you choose? Let's pray. God, I thank you. I thank you that the rules are really simple. This is not a complicated game. It's such an easy game to understand, a hard game to play, because it requires every day turning ourselves over to you. I pray that you would give us the strength to humble ourselves, to approach you with open hands and say, God, I'm not in control. This is your game. And I trust you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He guides me to green pastures, He leads me by still waters. And even though I walk through the valley of death, I will fear no evil, and I will worship you, and I will lift my voice. In my darkest hour, Lord, I give to you my life. Though strife and pain surround, you set my life apart. For your glory, I trust in you alone. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. And even though I walk through the valley of death, I know you are with me, and I will worship you, and I will lift my voice. In my darkest hour, Lord, I give to you my life. Though strife and pain surround, you set my life apart. For your glory, I trust in you alone. And I will worship you, and I will lift my voice. In my darkest hour, Lord, I give to you my life. Though strife and pain surround, you set my life apart. For your glory, I trust in you alone. Oh, I trust in you, Lord. through the valley of death, I will fear no evil. And even though I walk through the valley of death, I know you are with me. And I will worship you, and I will lift my voice. In my darkest hour, Lord, I give to you my life. Though strife and pain surround, you set my life apart. For your glory, I trust in you alone. And I will worship you, and I will lift my voice. In my darkest hour, Lord, I give to you my life. Though strife and pain surround, you set my life apart. Oh, for your glory, I trust in you alone. Oh, I trust in you alone.
Hey, once again, thank you for joining us today. We hope and pray that you guys learned something. And as always, we're going to be praying for you throughout the week. We love you, church. Bye.